Hi, my name is Pete Probst. I'm with Indigenous Energy, and I work on fuel quality projects with the Illinois Soybean Association. Today, we're going to sample some fuel tanks. So now we're on site of an underground storage tank. I'm going to show you how to sample that as well. So any place you're going to come upon a storage tank, you're going to see a number of different options in terms of how to access the tank. Some are easier than others, so we'll just go through that right now. This is typically what a fill port is going to look like. Usually has a color on the top indicating to the fuel truck delivery driver of what type of product is in the tank and where they can drop it off. You could take this off of here, take a look down at the fill port. This is one spot that's pretty easy to sample just because the access is right here. You do have to watch out because a lot of times there may be a flapper device in there that could impede when you're pulling the bacon bomb up or putting it down there. But beyond that, this is a pretty simple spot. It's also a spot in the tank where it's probably going to be the best looking fuel that you're going to see in the bottom. And that's only because any kind of sediment or things that are sort of piled up in the bottom, when fresh fuel comes down here, it basically pushes that away. And so if possible, it's good to take from multiple locations in the tank. So one thing you should do, especially when you're working in an area where there could be traffic, where you don't want to get hit, and also you don't want vehicles to fall into your workspace, is to set out some cones and establish a working area. It's also good to put some high visibility clothing on, such as this vest, to also let drivers easily identify where you are working. So this is the fill port of an underground storage tank. It's important for fuel quality purposes to make sure that this area is clean and dry as much as possible. You know, over time when it rains, water accumulates in here. If a fuel truck delivery driver is overflowed a little bit, fuel gets captured in here, and that's the job of this, is to prevent spills from getting in the environment. And typically if it gets too large of a spill, there's a plunger here that you can open up and release that fuel into the tank. Now any kind of sediment, garbage, water that happens to be in there and goes into that plunger is now inside your fuel, which can cause you problems down the road. So it's important to always make sure this is clean and dry as much as possible. Every underground storage tank is going to have similar components, but they may look a little different from site to site. So you've already identified the fill port, this manhole cover here, some other ones over here. And basically what this is going to do is open up the locations where we also may be able to sample from. This is where the pumps and plumbing are located. There's really nowhere to easily sample the tank here without taking out the pump, which is a big deal. But it's good to check out because there really should be no water in this sump pit. If there's water in the sump pit, it could easily penetrate the tank and contaminate your fuel. So even though we're not sampling from here, while you're out here looking around, it's good to include in your practices. This is another site where the fuel monitoring equipment is. So basically inside of here is a tank monitor. Measures the level of the fuel, and also if you have water in the tank, it'll measure those levels as well. It's not required to take this all the way out when you do a bottom sample, but it is required to make sure that you move this thing aside so that when you send the bottom sampler down there, you don't knock off the fuel floats. So this could be removed completely, the floats, or you could just leave it in there and move it off to the side. Slowly lower down the sampler, you'll feel it hit the bottom. It's filling with fuel now, and then you just bring it back up. It's good to flush it with fuel from this tank to make sure that you get a representative sample without leftover contaminants in the bacon bomb from a previous sample. If we were testing for microbes on this tank, it would be good to disinfect it, but since we're not testing for microbes, that's not necessary. It's actually good, especially on larger fuel tanks, to sample from multiple locations if available. You want to make sure you get a representative sample of what's going on in your tank, and so that's why we're going to sample not just from the monitor port, but from the fill port as well. So as you can see, there are slight differences in the tank samples depending on where I sampled it. This one was from the fill port, and this one was from the tank monitor port. And not a lot of difference because there's really no water in this tank, but you can see slightly more sediment than you would see on this one.